Good morning. Well, this morning, gospel reading, there are two questions that really stood out for me. The one from Jesus, when he sees John's disciples following him, he asks them, "What are you looking for?" And then the second question is in response from one of John's disciples. They ask him, "Where are you staying?" I mean, it's interesting this question, asking a question and responding with a question, isn't it? And this idea of questions just truly kept coming up for me all week long. First of all, many of you know that with the news of my new call to Alexandria, Virginia, a lot of people had questions for me. And it was an opportunity really to sit deeply in conversation and relationship with people. Some amazing conversations grew out of that, connections that I didn't know exist. And Thursday, I had a visitor in my office, a 5-year-old, who I think asked his mother, his father, and me about 30 questions in 10 minutes. I mean, you all probably remember that, when your kids are little and it's like, why this? Why that? Why this? I mean, he was like, Mother Amy, what do you think will happen if I do this? Mother Amy, why do you have that in your office? Amy, do you know why 5 is my favorite number? Right? I mean, those questions, though, were really, we forget that it was his way of staying in the conversation, of being in relationship with his mother and his father and myself as we talked. It was really kind of vulnerable, right, to just kind of keep on pulling us back to him because he felt like maybe our adult conversation was leaving him out. And have you ever noticed how, as we grow older, the answering things becomes more important than the questions we ask? This week I've really been convinced that the questions we ask are often more meaningful than the answers we find. In fact, I think asking good questions is truly an art. And I was reminded of a talk from the dean of Harvard School of Education. And he was talking to the teachers and educators, and he said to them, there are 5 important questions that you need to take with you and ask throughout your life. Now, if you're a parent of a teenager, you've probably heard this question before. The first question is, wait, what? In fact, I've heard you say that question before. It happens when you begin saying something like, Johnny, I need you to clean your room, and your kid hears the following, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden you say, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to go out tonight. And then all of a sudden the headphones come out and you hear, wait, what? That's a clarifying question. I mean, that's a great question. And the next question he said we should ask is, I wonder. I wonder. I mean, that's a question that our children are asked to think about all the time in Godly Play. When they hear the beautiful stories of Jesus, they're asked to say, I wonder. And Dean Ryan suggests, though, we might want to say, I wonder why. It's the way to remain curious about the world. And then to add to that, to say, I wonder if. I mean, that question gets us thinking about how might we be able to improve the world? How might we be able to improve what's going on in our lives? That I wonder if. The third question he brings about is, couldn't we at least, I think that's a brilliant question. Couldn't we at least is one of those questions that gets us unstuck, moves us into thinking about creating something new and new and exciting. Another question that he says is, how can I help? And I hear that question asked an awful lot around Christ Church. How are we called to serve God? How are we called to love our neighbor? This how is about the steady, slow work of being in relationship and listening to God's Spirit move us and challenge us. And finally, the last question he challenges his students to ask themselves is to say, what truly matters? What truly matters? For Dean Ryan and for us, this is the question that forces us to get to the heart of issues and to the heart of our own beliefs and our own convictions. It's a great question to ask as we enter into 2017. What is it that really matters? These kind of questions don't necessarily always have answers or obvious answers, and certainly not immediately. Instead, these questions often raise something for us to ponder. They cause us to do some serious soul searching. They give us something to carry in our hearts for the journey. What are you seeking? What do you hope to find? These are the very first words that Jesus speaks in the Gospel of John. His ministry and mission all begin with this question, this seemingly very, very simple question. But it's actually, I think you and I both know, really quite a profound question. And the disciples can't answer. They don't answer. In fact, they respond by saying, Rabbi, where are you staying? Which also sounds like a simple question, doesn't it? It sounds like a question about lodging or where he's going to spend the night. However, it's important to note in the Gospel of John, there's always meaning underneath in the images and the words. On the surface, the disciples seem to be asking just a basic question. But on a deeper level, when John uses this word minnow, he speaks of it a lot. It's the word that means, and he uses in his gospel, to abide, to abide. It's one of John's favorite words. He uses it to describe the relationship of indwelling, us indwelling with him, God indwelling in Jesus. Abide in me as I abide in you. That comes from the Gospel of John. So these seemingly really super simple questions are actually relational and deeply spiritual. What are we seeking? What do we want? We ask Jesus. Who are you, Jesus? Where do you abide? Can we stay with you? The disciples are yearning for a home, a place of deep abiding on their journey, and we are too. And it made me think of one of my very, very favorite children's books. A lot of you probably know it. It's by Margaret Wise Brown. It's called The Runaway Bunny. And if you remember the story, I love the images in it. The bunny tells his mother that he wants to run away, and he imagines all these different kind of scenarios so that he can get away from her. But his mother, for every escape plan he has, his mother has a way to find him, a plan to find him. He says, I'm going to become a fish and swim away from you. And she tells him, if you become a fish, I'll become a fisherman and fish for you. And when he threatens to climb high up on a rock and become a rock on a mountain above her, she tells him, I'll become a mountain climber and I'll climb to where you are. And this is my favorite. When he imagines being a bird and flying away from her, she promises, I will be the tree that you come home to, that you abide in. Jesus knows that we are all searching, each one of us, for something. Maybe running around looking for something else or someone else, a bigger house, a newer car, good grades, security, popularity, all those things that are temporary and fleeting. What do you seek? What do you need? It's the first question Jesus asked the disciples in the Gospel of John. Disciples who had hopes and dreams and were in a place of oppression in the Roman Empire. What do you need? What do you want? And it's a question for us today. What is it that we really need? Not just on the surface, not just on the top layer, but at the core of our very being. Jesus asks that question to us every day, giving us a chance to live into that question anew every day. And the truth is, we answer it every day, don't we? I mean, we answer it by the choices we make, by the decisions we make, by the priorities we set, by the way we honor our relationship with each other and with God. You know, Monday, tomorrow, is Martin Luther King's birthday that we celebrate. And I love what he said about questions. He said that conscience asks the question, is it right? I mean, that's the gift of God's voice in our heart and our soul, that question comes up. And we may not always know the answer, but we know where to find it. Jesus does not answer the disciples' question about where he's staying. Instead, he offers them this most generous invitation. He says, "Come and see." He calls out to the disciples to join him, to draw near, to abide. What are we looking for? At the end of the speech at Harvard, the dean offered one last question, a bonus question, he said. It came from a poem by Ray Carver, which he called the most important question we'll ever face. It is, and did you get what you wanted out of life? Even so. Dean Ryan says the even so captures perfectly the recognition of the pain and disappointment that inevitably makes up life, makes up a full life, and the even so that life offers possibilities and joy and amazing contentment. The poem continues, I did. What did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel beloved on earth. Jesus invited those early disciples, and he invites us to come and see, to do more than come and see where he's staying, but to come and see what love really looks like, to come and see how love is lived out day to day and poured out for all of us. And then knowing that love deep in our core, knowing that belovedness, living it out in fellowship with Christ, as Paul would say, that we then are called to share that love, to be that love in the world for others. Amen.